Hi, I'm Heather Smith and welcome to the Accounting Apps Podcast, exploring the accounting and business apps community. Now, before I forget, please stay up to date with the curated content I'm sharing by subscribing to this podcast, by signing up for the Accounting Apps newsletter available at accountingapps.io, and by joining the Accounting Apps Mastermind group and continuing the conversation about this episode. So today I'm joined by, I'm sort of wrapping up an interview I did at the Lightyear Docs 25 Unstoppable Growth Conference. And the interview, which will be at the end of the episode, is with techpreneur and triathlete Jo Hurley. So as a female founder in fintech, Jo Hurley shares her journey as a tech entrepreneur, learning from other sectors, selling her business to Deloitte, and how endurance sports have fueled her personal growth. But before that, I thought it would be worth just briefly talking about the conference. So the conference was held at Twin Waters, which is on the Sunshine Coast, and the venue is absolutely glorious. It's lots of flat sort of bungalows, and you can walk amongst the ground, which is beautiful. There's a beachy area. You can walk to the main beach very easily, and there's lots of kangaroos around. So I actually got to see a mama kangaroo and her baby Joey in her pouch, stretching and ruminating and twisting around and enjoying himself very, very much. So just an absolutely lovely venue. Conference went on for, I think it was 2 days. And so let me just just draw some of the highlights before I throw to that interview with Jo Hurley. So one of the speakers whom I've never heard of before was a gentleman by the name of Stan Phelps, Phelps, and he gave a session on differentiation. So 4 of the key takeaways from his session were sort of talking about, he was talking about how can you be some of those elite people who truly differentiate yourself. His first point was don't be a conformist cow. Cows technically are unique in that each has its own different spots, just like fingerprints, but they don't realize it, and so they just follow the herd. Many businesses do the same. They follow best practice rather than owning their own uniqueness. The second thing he talked about was embrace what makes you unique, the peacock effect. So many businesses try to fit in when they should be doubling down on what differentiates them. Take inspiration from the peacock and know what makes you unique and own it unapologetically. Third one was do less to stand out, the polar bear strategy. Sometimes differentiation isn't about adding more. It's about consciously doing less of what everyone else is doing. So that could be in the accounting industry, focusing on a very, very niche area of the industry and just letting everyone know, hey, if this particular area, I am the king or queen of this area, and just flick all of that type of work to me. So you're differentiating by subtracting instead of adding. And the fourth thing he highlighted was avoid the zebra effect. Don't blend in. Many businesses are unique but indistinguishable in a crowd. You fade into the background. Word of mouth is the best marketing strategy, yet only 1% of businesses have an actual strategy in place for word of mouth. Are you actually actively designing experiences that make you referable? He also went on to say a few things which that have really resonated with me. He used the word awesome, which you would know, but then he used the word flawsome, which is your flaws make you awesome. So sometimes your biggest strengths may be your quirks, your imperfections, your differences, and we can tend to hide them, but that's actually what makes you unforgettable. So he encouraged you to be flawsome, flawed and awesome. And one of the ways that you could figure out what your flaws are is go and look at your reviews. And if you have received any really low reviews, why were they? Have you received any 1-star reviews? What did they actually say? Did they say things like you didn't instantly answer the call on the Saturday when the client rang? Well, that is something awesome that you don't. Some people might want to work on Saturday, and if you don't want to work on Saturday, that's completely fine. So that's just kind of an example of something there. So that was Stan Phelps, Phelps, and he has many books that you can find on Amazon. So I do encourage you to go and look, explore, and I'm sure you can probably find him on a few podcasts out there. So the next thing I wanted to mention, it's always an honour to be in the presence of Paul Dunn, and I heard him give a talk, Heroes, Time to Rise, and he reminded us that accountants are the heroes who transform lives, who enrich lives, and who enhance lives. He highlighted that your business model matters more than your tools. He highlighted client selection is key to revenue growth, and that success isn't about making money, it's about mattering. Okay, and I'm always very grateful to for the opportunity to hear Paul speak. So thank you very much to the team at Lightyear Docs for bringing Paul Dunn. I actually basically kidnapped him for the 2 days and sat next to him and chatted away to him. So I felt very grateful for that opportunity. Now, the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that I was also grateful for the opportunity to speak at the event along with several other ladies. And our session was Transforming Firms in 2025, Insights on Growth, Tech, AI, Team Culture. And the panel, oh goodness, I think there were 7 or 17 or 70 people on the panel. I'm not quite sure. So I couldn't actually tell you what everyone said because there was a lot happening on the panel. So one of the things that I said, so I'll highlight a few of the things that I said on the panel. There was lots of great content on it, but there was a lot happening, and I struggled to hear everyone and know exactly what was happening. Old lady flaws, hey? So one of the things I said was, and I opened up with, the biggest opportunity for accounting firms in 2025 is accessing the existing data within your business, within your practice, and utilizing AI to surface insights around your customers and around what you are doing. AI, in simple forms, is data and algorithms. As an accounting practices, we have access to a lot of data. So how can we surface that to assist us in understanding how to support the insights? How can we surface the insights around our customers, and how can we use it to help them? One of the very easiest ways to use AI is through a meeting recording tool, and recording all your meetings and ensuring there's a ring fence of security around those meetings. At the end, you can go back, you can analyze it, extract activities, follow up, refer back to it later. It allows you to be really human and present in the moment with your clients. And some of the options include Otter.ai, Fireflies.ai, I think there's one called Fathom Recorder, and Microsoft Teams. Okay. So we talked a lot of the sort of things that you would imagine that we would mention in terms of AI and future firms, such as the firms that resist change will be obsolete, not because AI replaces them, but because their clients outgrow them. So I was very delighted to be able to speak on the panel. A lot of females actually came up and said they were really happy that there was a female presence at the conference and that they bought tickets because there was a females on the agenda. So thank you to all the females who did come up and say that. bless his cotton branded socks to Chris Wheatley of Spabata Group. He actually stood up and said, great to see a panel of female leaders on the stage. So we appreciated that. And if you are at a conference organizer and looking for female speakers, you can always touch base with me and I can always put you in contact with a number of speakers out there. I'm not always recommending myself, depending on the niche, depending on what you need, depending on where you are. I'm always suggesting people for speaking gigs. So you're always welcome to connect with me. And if I can help, I will try and do that. And I'm going to put all of this in the show notes. And one of the other things in the show notes is while I was up there, I wrote about people ask me, how do you get so many speaking gigs? And I have a lot of speaking gigs lined up for 2025, so I'm very grateful about it. But I put a lot of insight, a lot of sort of tips, tiny tips that you can kind of take away with you on how I get speaking tips. It's not an exhaustive list, but maybe that will help you. And I think that's everything. So you can go onto the lightyeardocs.com and see the past event. You can click in it and see elements of it, or I think you have to register to do that. So you might be able to go and see the Stan Phelps session, which I'd highly recommend. And there was a number of other people speaking, obviously, which might be very interesting to you. But let me hand over to Joe Hurley. Really hope you enjoy this episode. One of my hacks, which I have talked about before, is when I'm going to a conference, I try and go with someone because I find the conversation that we can have on the way there to be always really beneficial, and you kind of, rather than waste the time traveling, you waste the time sort of learning about each other and sort of connecting with each other. So Kylie Baxter, who was based down in Burleigh, she picked me up and Joe Hurley up on the way to the Sunshine Coast. So I was very grateful to Kylie at IQ Accounts. Wonderful speaker, wonderful moderator if you need a speaker. And on the way back, Melissa Voss drove me. So I hitchhiked there and back. So very grateful to Melissa Voss. She's the CEO and founder of Fuse Docs and FuseWorks. So many thanks to her as well. And over to Joe Hurley. I actually met her in the car journey, and her story was so interesting. I hopefully am sharing it with you, and maybe one day you can find her and listen to her motivational talks about everything that she's doing. So impressive what she has achieved. Thank you. Hello, Joe Hurley. Welcome to the Accounting Apps podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you share with our listeners who you are and kind of what you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jo. I have been in the accounting industry, the finance industry, for a very long time, actually almost 30 years actually. But I've been on this very new journey, which is all about, fitness and well-being and becoming an Iron woman. But yeah, essentially learning from scratch the skills of being a triathlete.
Yeah, well, and I'm looking at Jo, and she doesn't look like she's been in the industry 30 years. Look very young and very fit, as I'm sure our listeners would expect if you're training as you are. Can I circle back to, you're very involved in technology. Can I ask you to share with us your journey in the technology world?
Yeah, sure. So I am extremely passionate about retirement savings and essentially retiring, with enough money to have a decent quality of living, I guess, in the later stages of life. And so I was very lucky to be joining the superannuation industry at a time where self-managed super funds were just kicking off in the later 90s. And I actually chose the audit space because I felt like, as the only annual compulsory part of the self-managed super fund industry, it's the only service that's compulsory and annual, that I would have the chance to be of most impact and to touch more families and be able to help them through my expertise. And that's why I chose that. Technology essentially became an enabler for me to be able to impact more people. So it was really about growth with purpose, not so much, definitely not driven by how much money I was making or how big the business might get or anything like that, but how many people that we could give proper professional advice to as to whether, the journey they were on with their self-managed super funds was on track.
So you're sitting in the technical space. How much technical knowledge did you need on board to drive that?
Oh my gosh, so much. Yeah, it was really important. I always felt like it was such a waste of money for anyone to have an auditor that was had less technical expertise than the advisor who was working directly with the client. That just did not make sense to me. So I invested very heavily in my education. I was really I was the kind of front of class student in as many SMSF specialist courses as I could. I went to a lot of industry events, and this is in my early 20s. I was just an avid learner of strategy. That's how I met Grant and, a lot of the early, founders of our industry as well, because I was sitting there as just eating up as much as I could. I wanted to be familiar with the strategies that they were advising on and recommending, what problems they were trying to solve, so that I could appropriately audit the execution. And know whether the advisors who'd also been to the same conference had executed it as intended and whether it was appropriate versus having made mistakes that I could hopefully as timely as possible basically help them to resolve anything that might have gone wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, is it Malcolm Gladwell who says sort of an expert is 10,000 hours of investment in time, and it's always great to hear someone who has been successful who actually has done the hard yards.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think for me being young, I kind of hit the ground running, and I had the energy and enthusiasm. I was a young mum, I had a lot on my plate trying to get those qualifications and everything, but I did have that long-term view to say it's really important for me to do that. I think the other thing as well is when you set up your business, I set up my business at 27, and in order to close a lot of those deals, there was an element where I was being tested in the sales conversation. Do you really know your stuff? Can I trust you? Because on physical, if you were to just judge me on, a treasure book by its cover, you may, there was definitely something where I felt like I needed to prove and have some evidence to say that I wasn't just knocking on the door as a pretty face, but there was substance behind that.
Yeah, no, and that is an ongoing challenge. The interesting thing is I've run this podcast for maybe 8 years now, and it's actually so rare for me to find and speak to a female founder in the tech space. Can you speak to any of that, being an actual female founder in the tech space, and what advice would you have for either yourself when you started out or the next female tech founder?
Yeah, sure. So I think where I probably experienced the most pushback around my journey with tech was actually in my own industry, because I found, that it's kind of, you can understand because it's quite threatening, when you're talking in your own industry, they're very much driven by the desire to keep the status quo and to protect their patch and not to have to go through change or face that kind of competition. It's scary to them. So really, what was very important in my journey was going outside of my industry and learning and connecting with women who were doing it in other industries. And to be able to hear their tech journey, their failures, their successes, and to see what the potential was, and then to be able to bring that into my industry, that's where the fresh ideas were, the innovation and all those kinds of things. I could see what they were doing and then pull out the things that I felt like were really going to be advantageous for the industry that I was most passionate about. And that's how I kind of built my network and built my confidence to say, Jo, you're not crazy. You're on the right path. Keep going.
How did you find these other tech founders? Was it going to conferences? Was it looking on LinkedIn? Was it asking people to connect to you?
Mostly it was through women's networks,
okay.
So Women in Focus with CommBank, the Telstra Business Women's Awards, and that alumni as well. So going through that process, so I found that brought me a lot of opportunity. It gave me opportunities as well to speak to other entrepreneurs, be on panels, get on stage, have my ideas challenged, and also just give me confidence that the journey that I was on was also benefiting others at the same time. It wasn't me just taking, I was giving and receiving through that process.
Yes. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you talk to your journey of, I believe you're moving your business on? Did you sell it? How did that work?
Yeah, so I guess I was very much focused with my business on driving audit to be much more relevant and to get closer to when decisions and transactions were actually happening. And so I had this vision for audit activity that would look much more like what you see today with credit cards and banks and those kinds of things. A transaction happens or it's about to happen and there's some form of audit activity or flag that says, hey, we want to look at this further, and we can say, yes, this looks good. And I felt in an area where there was a constant drive to say this is compliance, it's red tape, it's a waste of money, that we'd be able to show better value if we were more, current, not looking at a transaction 2 years after it happened. And so that in order to get to that point, it needed investment, it needed scale, it needed people who knew how to do things where I could have the ideas and the vision, but the execution, I just had to admit that I didn't have the time to do everything and I couldn't do it on my own. So I went through a journey of looking at, mergers, different opportunities to potentially partner with, merge together audit firms and see, if the talents of the various partners could then free me up to be able to do more of that and potentially, just provide the scale that we needed because any of these types of things, you need the data. The more funds we had, the more data we'd have to be able to train the technology to get better. So this is very early stages of robotics, automation, using data feeds and analytics to be able to pull out the transactions that we needed to pay attention to. During that process, I engaged with Deloitte, and it was a firm that I'd had previous experience with. I'd worked there as a cadet, and I had good connections with the Deloitte digital team. We ran a heap of, scenarios about what this could actually look like and modelled it out. And so there was a point in time where, Deloitte felt that it made sense to acquire my business and that we would move forward together to hopefully build out this solution and with the scale we needed and the expertise. So I went as part of that package. I never intended for that to be a sale, an exit, or some form of early retirement. I was not selling to exit.
Yeah.
I was selling to grow. And because I still had dreams of a much bigger impact than what I'd achieved on my own. Unfortunately, the realities of how that kind of played out resulted in me actually retiring at the age of 39 and finding myself just at that point where you go, well, I don't know, what do I do now? I've got restraint of trade, I've got all these things happening, and my purpose feels like it's on the shelf. Is that it for me?
A very, very interesting journey, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Now, we did speak earlier, and I know that you do a lot of heavy training and you do a lot of sort of triathlon preparation. Can you talk us through, and the word I'm going to use is probably incorrect, but how you control your mind and how you think during those hours and hours of training? Sure.
Yeah, and triathlon is a hell of a lot of work. I've realised actually through this journey that I'm the type of person that likes to make out like everything's really easy and like things just come easy to me. And, I think it's to make other people feel like it comes from a good place. It's because I want other people to feel like it's possible for them too. And I feel like if they think it's accessible and if I can do it, they can do it. Like I've strongly believed in that. But over time and probably with a bit of maturity and reflection, I've realised that being honest about the amount of work and how hard it really is and the realities of what I'm actually doing every day, that enables a deeper conversation. And it doesn't scare off the people who really want that for themselves anyway.
Yeah.
And it's actually doing them a disservice to hide that, and it kind of devalues what you do. So yes, in terms of like what that really, like my reality looks like every day, yes. Training for a long distance triathlon, which is where I'm aiming for, is the half Ironman and the Ironman distance triathlons. It is, I'm training 20 plus hours a week and spending a lot of time. Yeah, I have a lot of reflection time where I'm on the bike for hours. And some of my sessions are require me to be very, very present with all of the numbers and data and the physical actions that I'm doing in that training session. And then there's other sessions that I do where it's like a meditation. It actually gives me space to think through and process the reasons why I'm here and the reasons why I care so much and what it is I'm actually building and working on. And that has proved so valuable. I think it's really been so beneficial even for me preparing for, to be able to go on stage for the first time and share this stage of my life and what it's truly about. Most of that I wrote in my mind as I rode my bike and as I, did long pool training sessions that didn't really require me to be, fully in training mode. I had that thinking space to reflect. I don't know, sometimes you hear I used to have the thing of like all the best ideas come to you in the shower.
Yes.
Or something like that, because you know what it is? It's because in the shower or in the pool, I'm out of my head and in my body.
Yes.
And suddenly it frees the creative brain to give you like messages that have such clarity.
Yeah.
Because all the noise and all the to-do lists and all that stuff, it's not rattling around. It's not present.
Yeah.
And so that is where I'm most creative. And sometimes, you know what, it sucks because you're on the bike and you get these epiphanies and you can't write them down. And sometimes I get to the end and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I just had like at my fingertips, like, the solution to the world's problems, and now I've forgotten what it was.
So we just saw Nick Sinclair on stage, and he has a recorder on him at all times. Maybe that's he said. I keep a recorder on me at all times. Maybe that's your solution.
Oh my gosh, I really love that. I really, really love that. I love storytelling, but I struggle to sit down and write the story. Every time I step on stage, it's not. I don't write a speech. I don't write it.
Yeah.
So
it just comes out. It just activates.
It activates. It activates through connection and eye contact and body language and stuff. And I feel someone asking me to go deeper, and I step into that.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly where it's going to go. So that is such a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clayton Oates was also on stage, and he was saying how he writes down every little idea, like as you were saying, writing down those ideas of clarity. So maybe if we can capture them, the world will be saved and a better place. Thank you, Joe. I should also mention Joe Hurley was the keynote speaker at Lightyear Docs event here at the Sunny Coast, the 2025, and it was a sensational talk, and so many people have said it was really impactful for them. So that's wonderful that you were here to give that talk. Thank you so much for joining me on the Accounting Apps podcast, Joe.
Thank you so much, and really nice to meet you at this event. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.